We are finally now back to talking about good old Goka, and it's time to continue on with this series talking about the Hito Hitanomi model Goka and just who exactly Goka is. You see, in our initial video, we dove into how Goka was represented by the moon, the powers and abilities of Goka, and how their story played out within the future events that is today's story of One Piece. And I recently uploaded a video, The Five Gods of Life and the Six Gods of Death, that also directly connect to the story of Goka, and it mainly goes through the Medaka quintuplets, which is one of the main things we love to talk about. But now I'd like to go even deeper and get just who exactly Goka was in the past. The names, the details, that's what we're here for. Because when it comes to the being that was the moon of the past, the moon to Joy Boy's son, I believe that being was Davy Jones. The same exact way that the sun god's powers of being reincarnated, and now the name of the sun god would be Nika, that's Luffy. It is the same thing that applies to the moon god that was Davy Jones of the past. I believe when he died and his powers were taken and reincarnated into that of a devil fruit, that is what we get with the Hito Hitonomi model Goka. They originate from Davy Jones. My friends, let's theorize for a second. You see, as we discern, that name Goku got revealed to us in Fishman Island when they gave us the names of all the children, and specifically with Yonka 1 and Yonka 2. Now, alone, every god individually represents something, like the forest represents Ichika, the green child, the sun, the red child, but their numbers also represent them working together. So the Nika that is 2 represents the sun and the forest working together, just like the Sanka that is 3 represents the sun, forest, and rain working together. And that's why it's very important that Yanka, the Earth, is number 4, because the Earth, in order for the Earth to be created, we need the sun, moon, force, and rain all working together. But that's 5 that I just mentioned right there. You see, when we mention the name Yanka as in Yanka 1, it's just only these 4, the Earth, rain, sun, and forest. But when it's Yanka 2, or just what should actually be Goka, it's 5 of them. It's all 5 together: the sun, rain, forest, earth, and moon. But as you see, the moon has changed itself from the name of Goka to that of Yonka too. It's taken the same name as the Earth, but it also tells you what the moon chose to do. Normally, Yonka 1 would accompany the sun, rain, forest, and earth all together, right? But if we jump over to Yonka 2, now it's all 5 of them with the moon now acting as the Earth. Essentially, there is no moon. The moon does not exist. All that there is the moon replacing and acting as the earth, or the moon has replaced and taken all of the powers of all of these other gods. And that is exactly why the name Goka means 5 fruits or 5 gods, because that's what the moon did, stole the powers of all the gods. And that's the serpent of Hellflame that we have within our mural that we talk about. Goka. But this is where we come and discern the name, because that name Goka, just like Nika, Ichika, all are the names of the gods reincarnated. And to reiterate what we mentioned in our last videos, you see the names Ichika, Nika, Sanka, Yanka, Goka, all of them together. It's just Sino-Japanese, Ichi, Ni, San, Yo, Go, and Egyptian mythology of the Ka, the soul. And the soul is specifically provided to those within Egyptian mythology by the Nehebekau, the primordial snake god. Or just another name for him was the collector of souls. And that ties right back into directly what we tell and talk about Goka being a collector of souls, a housing agent for the ancient energy source, but also a symbolization of the moon that sits there and is constantly absorbing the sun's rays and the sun's energy. Through the combination of these Sino-Japanese numbers and this Egyptian Ka, this is showing us how the gods have all been born and reincarnated into the world with souls, with Kas. And so that tells us the names Ichika, Nika, Sanka, Yanka, and even Goka, they're not the names of the past gods. These are the names of the past gods that have been reincarnated with souls within them. And that's what's important and that's what's needed. All these gods, instead of normally fighting and warring over the land, they now are reincarnating with souls wanting to work with the land and create more life onto this world. And we know who brought this death into the world. As stated into the mural, it's the Serpent of Hellfame. That's the one who destroyed everything and took all of the ancient energy source for itself. The energy source just being the souls, human souls. It killed and ate everybody essentially. And because of this, the moon now rules over the world. Humanity is now offering the ancient energy source, as we see in the mural, to this serpent. And this parallels directly to what we see in Skypiea. They're offering their own souls essentially. Because in Skypiea, we see that they also sacrifice to a serpent so that it does not destroy and take over the whole world and cause a massive earthquake. That is very much so a very parallel to what we are seeing within the mural here. The snake required sacrifices. And this is what humanity thought needed to happen in order to keep their dreams and desires being manifested after the moon had taken over and destroyed the world. And this is how we're able to get into the identity of the moon being Davy Jones. Because remember, as stated earlier, it is the moon's influence that controls the tides. The moon is what actually causes the floods, as long as it gains control over the rain and the weather. And that's exactly what the moon does every time. The moon influences the rain, and this is what causes the flood that always changes the dynamic of the world. And this is also going to open your point of view to help you understand just exactly who the dragon in the mirror are and the snake. The snake being the moon, the dragon being the rain. Those two are just Davy Jones and Emo. The moon and the rain working together to drown out the sun. You see, in the story of our five gods, there are two in particular who brought about this death and destruction, and we have identified them as the moon and the rain, specifically Sanka and Goka. And taking a look at the mural, that's just Goka, the giant snake to our right, as we've identified, and Sanka being the dragon on top of the tree within the second world. That's our rain god. And as we see with both the dragon and the serpent sharing their flame between each other, this would also tells us about the rain and the moon's relationship in the past that has forever been paralleling throughout the story. The rain usually being identified as a dragon, as we see within the mirror on top of the tree, and the moon being represented as a giant snake or some type of feathered serpent. You see this parallel directly in Wano with Kaido and Orochi, Orochi being a multi-headed dragon and Kaido being a giant serpentine-like snake, but also just a dragon in general. And together we see that these two were together to topple the kingdom of the sun. And this is not the actual kingdom of the sun. We're just referencing Wano and Odin's whole kingdom as the kingdom of the sun. That's the parallel. But that is not the only place. If we go back to Fishman Island, also we have Hody Jones and Vanderdecken, which coincidentally, with all the connections we're getting to Davy Jones, Hody Jones and his last name specifically, and Vanderdecken coming from the Davy Jonesian clan. He is a descendant of Davy Jones, in fact. And what's funny is you have Vanderdecken representing our rain here, and Hody Jones representing the moon. And just how Kaido and Orochi both were types of dragons, you have Hody Jones and Vanderdecken both being types of sharks. Vanderdecken is a bullhead shark, and Hody Jones is a great white shark. And this most definitely connects us to the recent pictures we got from Oda showing us Emu getting swallowed by what seems to be a shark. This is exactly what we're talking about. Emu and Davy Jones being the same person within the same body. The parallels are what help us figure out the answer. And one big parallel we're seeing in common between these rain figures is obsession. And that's obsession with a beautiful woman. When we look at Orochi, he's absolutely obsessed and infatuated with Komurasaki. When we look at Vanderdecken, it is the same exact thing. He is absolutely infatuated with getting to Shirahoshi. And these are our two main rain figures we're talking about, the parallel to Imo, who was our other rain figure. And I believe it's the same thing there. Imo was absolutely obsessed with Queen Lily and wanted Queen Lily for themselves. And just how we see Orochi end up having to go to Kaido, who is the moon figure, in order to get help in his endeavor to take over the kingdom. I believe Emu did the same thing to Davy Jones. The Moon and the Rain had now effectively teamed up together and had now begun enacting a plan behind the scenes to take down the sun and flood the forest. And this is why it all starts with number one, Ichika. Otherwise, the forest god, i.e., Queen Lily. You see, the younger you are, the greater your power over imagination is, the more you can create within your mind, the less limitation you actually have. And that's very important when it comes to the symbology of the force that creates and brings life into this world, but also how it preserves life. And that ties back into what we talked about within episode one. And that's the fact that we learned that the souls are contained within the trees where the forest god has complete domain over. And these are the same souls that we see within the mural going down within the flames of hell through this grueling journey to meet the king of hell. And there, they're rebirthed anew. Their dreams and desires are essentially granted to them. But this also ties into one very important being, and that's Goka, the serpent of Hellflame, who comes directly from down there. Goka is your king of hell, or otherwise, Davy Jones. And with Davy Jones being the moon, this helps us completely identify why we see things like Gear 5 or even the Minx awaken within the moonlight. If it's the forest god that has domain over the trees, and the souls that go down on the grueling journey through hell to meet the king of hell and have their dreams and desires granted to them so they can adapt and change, it makes complete sense why everything happens in the moonlight now. Everyone's adapting because of the moon. The Serpent of Hellflame not only destroyed and changed the world, it helped everybody adapt to this new world that it brought. And that was in tandem with the forest god. The souls died, went down through their grueling journey, met the king of hell, had their dreams and desires granted, and it was the forest god who then brought them back into the world. So now the souls of humans with their dreams and desires granted to them and reincarnated needed a place to be placed. And that's where I believe the animals and the creatures come in. These souls were placed into animals and creatures, the same thing the forest god also has a domain over. The world that had been destroyed was a world where enslavement, fighting, and war was happening. Humans were becoming more and more like beasts and animals, like devils, but with the true devil showing up and destroying and getting rid of them. Humanity had now been reset to that of a way where you had humans waking up inside of animals, or animals gaining human consciousness, awakened to human sentience, and not the reverse, where humans are becoming more animalistic. The world has essentially been put down the right path. And it was all thanks to the forest and the moon. But let's not forget about that third player, the rain. The first kingdom had been destroyed, the world had been destroyed. And now it was time for humanity to regroup, recollect, and establish a new dynamic and a new world kingdom. And this is what enters us into our second world, with our dragon that is the rain coming down and descending upon the tree, and the world itself completely and entirely flooding. You see, that's something that would mainly be caused and attributed to the moon itself. And when looking at the dynamic now, humanity has now gotten away from the slavery, fled, adapted, and changed, and now they're following in the teachings and the beliefs of the forest. And it's not the sun that saved them, it is in fact the moon that saves them. This is a humanity that worships the ideals and the thoughts of the moon, the ideology of the moon, the will of the moon. And following our parallels, we already know the will of the moon. With Hody Jones over in Fishman Island, his greatest goal was to take over the kingdom and get the ancient treasure that was the ancient energy stowage that coincidentally made him look exactly like Nika. When it comes to Kaido, all he sat there doing was recreating fruits and looking for Joy Boy or Nika himself. And the fruit that he recreated were called smile fruits, a reference to Nika himself. They made you laugh uncontrollably, just like Nika does. He worked with the Joker of all people, a clown named Caesar Clown. I don't think it gets any more prevalent. This parallels directly right back to Davy Jones and the fact of his obsession with Lily and his obsession with becoming king of the world. In fact, being recognized more than the sun, being recognized more than Joy Boy. And to be more specific, I believe it is Emu, our rain figure, that wanted Lily. And Davy Jones wanted the power or the title that Joy Boy had and all the praise and love that he got. So these two teamed up and worked together. And that was to get Lily away from Joy Boy. And that's so Lily could be influenced. You know that ability we talked about of lilies, the forest gods, the ability to tame demon or to use the souls of the dead specifically, being able to bring demons into this world. That's what was sought after. but not by the moon that is Davy Jones. Davy Jones just wanted the power, the glory. Emu wanted the power, the glory, the girl. They wanted everything. And they were even willing to betray their partner who helped them in the first place to get it. And we've already seen this parallel. We had Kaido betray Orochi, cutting his head off, and we had Hody Jones betray Vanderdecken, stabbing him in the stomach. The story truly just got a lot more interesting. With the world destroyed and humanity having been led to salvation, humanity now had to rebuild and regroup, and Queen Lily, I believe, was at the forefront of this. The enslaved that had died out in the first world and had been adapted and changed by the moon and the forest. These slaves are who would become the eventual 20 kings, I believe. Beings who had lived former lives as slaves where they prayed out to the sun god. He showed up, everything was destroyed, and they were brought back, adapted and survived in this new world in a way that only they could survive and thrive. These original 20 kings I believe to be the D Clan exactly. A clan of beings who had half of the soul of a demon within them and half of the soul of a human within them, therefore encompassing a half moon, one that's half lit and half darkened, or otherwise a D. And this is where Emu comes into play, otherwise known as Mu. Because if the original 20 kings are just the original 20 D clan family, when Navanko tells us about the Nerona family that comes from that time 800 years ago, that would mean that Emu is also a D clan member. And now we've gotten full insight into just how Emu might have been able to take down the system in the kingdom that was the ancient kingdom in Joy Boy. Because with Emu paralleling Orochi, these two beings representing the rain, what Orochi does to truly make his way into Wano and the kingdom that is Wano, he influences Kozuki Sukiyaki, Odin's father, the leader of all of Wano. And I believe that is exactly what Emu did. They were an infiltrator into the D clan, and in order to influence the leader of all of them, and that was Queen Lily. With Queen Lily being the forest and Emu being the rain, this is what would bring about the eventual flood. And with the idea being that Emo eventually ends up taking over Lily's body and controlling the world, becoming the Yonka that is an impersonator to the true Earth, we have to look directly at what the sacred animal of Alabasta is, the nation that Queen Lily would have ruled over. And that's because it's a catfish. And that is exactly what's going on. We're being catfished, the world's being catfished, everybody is being catfished. We're being tricked. Queen Lily is being impersonated. The world is being impersonated. And with the idea that the catfish is sacred to Alabasta, that's the sacred animal, this isn't the only place that a catfish is sacred to. The one place and the main creature we've mainly talked about in this Goka series is Kashigami, a giant catfish, a giant feathered serpent. This is everything. And it's so one to one. Kashigami is a snake that represents every single god combined into one being that they worship and they sacrifice to. And if they don't sacrifice, he'll destroy the world. That's everything we talk about with Goka from the past and why they sacrificed to him. Everybody wanted their dreams and desires manifested, and they believed that Goka was the container, the holder for the ancient energy source. But it goes even deeper because if we remember specifically, they also worship that same thing as a statue, the Vars statue. And this is where we start to uncover the mystery of Emu, because the Vars statue itself represents the earth, the world. Emu believes they are the earth, the world. And we are establishing the fact that Emu is Yonka too, the fake earth or the fake world. And with a giant feathered serpent or catfish snake that represents the same exact thing, where all the gods have had their power stolen and taken or eaten, and now they're all within one being, Yonka too. This statue itself represents everything about Emu. This statue is Emu. And what's even crazier, Skypiea itself is based entirely off of Aztec mythology. And when going into Aztec mythology, the five suns creation myth, where they detail how the world has been destroyed and recreated many different times, where five different sun gods ruled over the world, we get every answer we've looked for. In our first world, it had a world where it was ruled by giants, but it was destroyed and they were devoured by jaguars. This world was called Four Jaguar. The fourth letter in our alphabet is, in fact, the letter D, and we have a giant named Jaguar D Sol. In the first world of this Aztec mythology, we have a D clan, and the giants themselves being mentioned having to adapt and survive to being devoured by jaguars. But in the second world, it gets even more interesting because the humans get destroyed by great winds and they get sent to live atop the trees and turn into monkeys. This connects us directly to our minks themselves. And Wanda herself tells us that the humans are just hairless monkey minks. But to take it even a step deeper, we have the Monkey D clan itself. And Luffy himself is based off of the monkey god Hanuman from Hindu mythology. And Hanuman's father is Vayu, the god of wind. The gist you're going to see in these multiple worlds is the fact that every time a race is destroyed, they end up being adapted and changed in order to be able to survive to the way the world was destroyed. But the world that is really important is the fourth world, because that is the world where the river goddess Chalkutitwe lives and rules over. And specifically, this is our embodiment in Aztec mythology of Queen Lily, our forest god. And remember, we're specifically locked into talking about the second world in the middle right now. And in this fourth world in Aztec mythology, what happens is Chalkutitwe cries so much that she floods the world, turning everybody into fish beings and granting one of them the gift of water every 10,000 years. Now, if you just look at what encompasses that story, humans being flooded out, that's what happens in the second world. The fishmen coming into existence or the merfolk because everybody gets turned into fish beings. But also, one specifically gets granted the gift of water to protect the animals in the forest and the sea forest. So, as well as encompassing talking about how the merfolk came to exist, it talks about how Poseidon came to exist. And its job is to protect the sea forest, which would make Poseidon our forest god. But the forest god of the sea that was brought about by the original forest god, through this story alone, we are able to backtrack from here and find our original forest god that is Queen Lily. And this also encompasses what we talked about earlier, with Queen Lily being the forest god that tamed demons, those that had died and had to adapt within the moon's light. But the important thing about the story is the husband of Chalkutiti. That's Tlaloc. Tlaloc specifically being the god of water. And this is Emu. You see, Tlaloc was known for having ringed eyes, just like Emu, but also characteristically having fangs or tusks. That connects us directly back to the Skypian statue, which has the same exact thing. So again, that reiterates the point. That just might be Emu. Tlaloc also had four cardinal jars that represented the four cardinal directions, just like how the One Piece world is split. And when Tlaloc opened one of these jars, a drastic weather would have come out of it. Drought, frost, disease. These jars contain some problems. And this attributes to the way that Emu keeps the world and the state they keep the world in. And that's separated within four different seas, not wanting anybody within the world to actually come together and have somewhat of peace and harmony. Because if that were the case, those who live at the top of the red line would not live the way they do. But the most important thing about Tala, you might have thought I forgot about the third world, but it was actually Tlaloc who ruled over that world. And that world was destroyed by great rains of fire, and all the beings turned into birds. And then we're talking about a story of adaptation surviving. So, bird beings destroyed by fire, firebirds, lunarians. And it's specifically Tlaloc who does this, and as we know, the world government is responsible for going atop the red line and hunting and getting rid of all the lunarians. So I do believe this directly does connect us right back to Emu. And the most important player in all of this is the catfish. You see, there's two things that come from that word catfish. You can catfish someone and trick them, or you can have a cat eat a fish. And that's what I believe exactly what emu is. They're a cat mink to be exact. That would be why we see the statue here that embodies and represents emu themselves. why the people of Skypiea are stuck within the same ideals from the past. And it also encompasses just everything we're talking about right now. Being catfish, Lily's body being stolen, the powers of the forest god being taken. A cat eating a fish is as simple as it gets. And if you really break that down, cats hate water. Doesn't Emu live at the highest point that they possibly could? As far away from the water as they ever could be. Not to mention when Usopp and Sanji are talking to Lady Kokoro, and she's specifically telling us about how when she's a mermaid and gets to a certain age, she can walk on land. They mention a Nekomata, a yokai, which is directly connected to Emu because we've seen the Gorosei and them use nothing but yokai powers. And this yokai specifically is a cat that when it goes to a certain age, its tail splits in two. That age is 100 years. Are you kidding me? And they're specifically known to control corpses like puppet masters. You mean the forest god who tames demons? We talk about the forest god having the powers over the souls of the dead, and the Necromata specifically has necromantic powers. But not just that, they use their powerful influence to blackmail and enslave humans. I'm more than certain that Emu is a cat mink. And not just any cat mink. This whole thing we're talking about deals with the fact that the powers and abilities or the adaptation comes from the moon. One thing we learned on Skypiea is there was a whole civilization of humanity that went and lived on the moon. And they're specifically fighting with space pirates that are all these animalistic like creatures. I am more than certain that Emu comes from that group of people. And Emu is a space cat. That's the magical powers within the story of the Necomata that's gained. Emu's a space cat. They're a space cat that is catfishing the world. A space cat that has betrayed their accomplice to make it to the top. So we now have our two main players who are working behind the scenes to bring about the change and destruction. And that is Mu themselves and Goka, or just Davy Jones. And there's a recently part before this is titled Mu and Emu. The differentiation is very important because I believe Mu themselves is just the rain being that we talked about, the dragon that's referenced in the mural. They do not become Emu until they gain the body or the soul of Davy Jones, and these two combine together, as in the dragon in the mural and the snake within the mural combined together, giving us two beings within the body of the original forest god that is Queen Lily, making it so they can use and wield the abilities of the forest god and catfish the entire world. The name Emu is a combination of the two beings, Mu and I. And this is where we start to get into the story of betrayal, and specifically why the name reads I am you. Because similarly, in Wano, you have Orochi who ends up going over to Kaido, Kaido acting as a very powerful moon being that helps him get into power and topple the Joy Boy figure. Or otherwise, just to topple the king. We see the same thing down in Fishman Island with Hody Jones and Better Decken, where they tie up King Neptune and topple the king there, and Hody Jones takes over. And what normally happens, as we see in what was established in part one, the snake gets slayed by the sun god figure. We see this literally in Wano most recently with Luffy defeating Kaido. We also see it in Skypiea with Noling destroying and cutting off the head of Kashigami. And Kashigami, as we know it, being a direct representation of Goka, a giant snake that they worship and sacrifice to. And this snake represents all the gods. And I believe this tells us directly that our rain figure was able to pit the sun and the moon against each other, causing them to end up in this everlasting battle where these two always end up battling each other, one destroying the other, either the sun blocking out the moon or the moon blocking out the sun. But whatever each happens, that eclipse stays. So if we get a solar eclipse where the sun blocks out the moon, it is a solar eclipse eternally. The moon does not come back. There is no moon. Whereas if we got a lunar eclipse, now we've lost the sun. It's cold winter, lots of death. Essentially, the rain has done a successful job of pitting the sun and the moon against each other eternally, so where they will never work in coexistence and the world will never function properly, allowing the rain forever to keep the world flooded. And this quite literally tells us how the rain is able to do so. By getting our sun god figure and pitting the sun against the moon, and having the sun slay the moon acting as a reflector for the sun's light, but also a container for the ancient energy source. This source is then able to be accessed by the rain. It's able to be stolen by the rain. And I believe that is exactly what Emu did. Emu pitted the sun and the moon against each other, therefore getting the sun to slay the moon, allowing Emu to step in and steal the ancient energy source for themselves. Therefore giving us a being known as Emu that has stolen and taken the powers of the King of Hell, who is the souls contained of everybody within him. Now Emu has the souls. Emu has everybody's dreams and desires. And now it makes sense why the name is I am you. Emu is all the dreams of humanity turned dark, turned tragic. And that's what's ruling over and controlling the world. But it's also why Emu is absolutely scared of the sun and moon coming back together and working on the same side. You see, we've been stuck in Skypiea, and the one thing we see within Skypiea when Enel goes to moon is the mural. And the mural there, and even the civilization there, we learned that humanity up there had access to great amounts of electricity, and it ran an entire civilization. But the people of the sun, what we attribute to the D Clan, they run off to what seems to be the ancient energy source. They have some type of mystical power. Something I believe Emu does not. And this is why we've attributed to Emu to being a space cat. Emu themselves, I don't believe, can naturally produce the same abilities or hockey that allows everybody else to manifest their dreams and desires. And this is why Emu then chose to steal the ancient energy source from the sun and the moon and to slay the gods. But the thing is, Emu does not create this themselves. So they need to find an artificial means of creating the ancient energy source. And that's why the mother flame is absolutely so important to Emu. If the ancient energy source is an artificial soul, and we've seen Emu working with the Pacifista, the Seraphim, and these are all clones that Emu are trying to bring to life and have their own artificial souls. This just tells us that the mother flame itself is an artificial soul, and not just any. It's essentially Nika's soul that Emu is trying to recreate, but artificially. One that can be controlled just like the Pacifista, just like the Seraphim. One that has the infinite capabilities of creating and bringing imagination into reality. Emu can't create the energy source, nor can they hold it in. But with the mind, body, and soul of the earth, sun, and moon, Emu can do anything. And by anything, I mean tame demons and foster devil fruits into this world. You see, with Emu pitting the sun and the moon against each other, and both the sun and the moon essentially killing each other out, this allowed Emu to harness and take the energy source for themselves, therefore giving Emu the mind of the moon and the body of the forest or just the earth, essentially taking over Queen Lily's body. And with Emu having the mind of the moon, this looks into and tells us why Emu has green eyes. The two minds, or the two souls that are awake, are Mu themselves and who I believe to be the moon are just Davy Jones. As we specifically see with Cavendish, when Hakuba wakes up within him, the only time he has green eyes is when they are both awake, and specifically, whoever's in control determines the color. And as we see with Emu and her ring dyes, or at least I should say their ring dyes, they're only red. If there's another soul, when that other soul takes control, the eye should also be another color. And I believe the other being or the other mind trapped within that body is Davy Jones himself, being forced to essentially watch as the events of the world unfold. You see, Queen Lily had reset humanity, got them back to a way of animals simply awakening to human sentience, animals gaining human consciousness. But Emu was now going to reverse that. With the death and destruction brought about through the world, instead of those souls going down, meeting the King of Hell, and being brought back in tandem with the forest god so that their souls may be retained, their dreams and desires may be retained. Those who died were now just going down and making deals with devils themselves. No forest god in tandem with them. And so, instead of humans and devils coming back in tandem, them having half the darkness and half the light within them, it was devils taking over and taking host into the world. The humans were effectively switching places with these devils, giving them host.
And as we know, with the souls being in the trees, this is why they manifest in the form of fruits.
And this is also exactly why the entire world had to be flooded. Because if they were manifesting within the forest, within the trees, the only way to stop this was to oversaturate the trees with water. Because the more water you give these trees, the less time they have, or the harder time they have, gaining oxygen, therefore stopping them from producing fruits. These fruits, which are devil fruits, containing devils themselves within them, people's dreams and desires turn doublet. This flood was specifically created to prevent Emu from fostering any more devils within the world, unable to access the world itself. You see, the curse of Davy Jones is to be cursed to the bottom of the sea and forever walk the sea. And Emu had now stolen the mind of Davy Jones, the powers of Davy Jones, and used those same powers and abilities to bring devils into this world. With the original devil being Davy Jones himself and his curse to the bottom of the sea, any other created after that or from those abilities would also be cursed to the bottom of the sea. And that's exactly what Emu and the devil fruits are. They are all cursed to the bottom of the sea. They are cursed to be within darkness because they came from darkness.
Specifically the darkness from the underworld. And with the whole like A's lobby having something such as an endless day or an endless sun over it, this seems to hint at the fact that this was placed there to prevent that endless darkness from encroaching and coming out.
But I do believe that is what Emu's true plan is, to shroud the world into complete darkness, to allow for the arrival of many, many more demons just like Emu, and specifically just like the ones within our devil fruits. And the only way to expel or to defeat this darkness is with the sun's light. And that's in all corners of the world. And we do know that the sun's light does not reach all corners of the world. So it's not just the sun who is needed. It's the sun and the moon who even reflects the sun's light at nighttime, lighting up the world at all times. The sun and the moon absolutely need to work together in order to defeat the true darkness and the true evil. The sun and the moon must meet again. And it is very important that we get the recent pictures of Emu in the mouth of a shark, but also next to a shark guitar, the same guitar that Brook, the Soul King, rocks. That's a direct Goka connection. But it's also a parallel to what we see with Kaido and Orochi. They both wield dragon fruits. Just like how we see Vanderdecken and Hody Jones, they are both sharks. And that's what's swallowing Emu. That's what this guitar is. A shark. And what's funny, we're all paralleling this to Davy Jones. The soul that Emu is absolutely terrified of actually coming back. The moon actually reflecting the sun's light and expelling the darkness. The shark itself is Davy Jones. And if Davy Jones is the moon that reflects the sun's light, and we see the shark in reference to music and a guitar, this is also a reference to the music that is played by the sun god's heartbeat that will be heard throughout the day where the sun god rules, but also throughout the night where the moon rules, reflecting the sun's light and that very same joyous heartbeat. So again, the sun and moon must work together in order for everybody, day and night, to hear the drums of liberation.
All right, there is a lot to unpack this video, I know, but I really do hope you guys enjoy it. This has been the part 2 to our Goka series, and I'm considering a part 3, but I also do have another video planned titled The Will of the Moon and the Sun that details how the descendants of the sun and the moon are going to come together and liberate the world and defeat the darkness. And it mainly talks about Luffy and Blackbeard. So we're going to decide whether we end up just doing part 3 on Goka or we talk about the sun and the moon themselves.
Either way, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I am definitely making my way over here to making more videos. As I've said, I've got another video planned for you guys. This recording in here is done for this video. And expect probably about 2 more here upcoming in the next month or so. I'm going to try and be very quickly and timely with these. But as always, let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions down below in our comment section. Like and subscribe if you would. Share it with some friends. and I will see you guys the next time we are here theorizing.